the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Text 11. Ye yata mam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajam yaham mama vartmanuvartante manushya partha sarvashaha. All of them, as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Text 12. Kankshata karma nam siddhim yajanta iha devataha kshipram iha manushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Translation. Men in this world desire success and fruitive activities, and therefore they worship the demigods. Quickly, of course, men get results from fruitive work in this world. Text 13. Chaturvarnam maya shrishtam guna karma vibhagashaha tasya kartaram apimam vidya kartaram avyayam. According to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the four divisions of human society were created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. Text 14. Namam karmani lipanti name karma phalaspira iti mam yo pijanati karma virna sabhajyate. Translation. There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. Text 15. Evam gyatva kritam karma purvair api mumukshubhihi kuru karmaiva tasmat tvam purvai purvataram kritam. Translation. All the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding and so attained liberation. Therefore, as the ancients, you should perform your duty in this divine consciousness. Text 16. Kim karma kim akarmeti kavayo pyatra puhita tate karma karvakshyami yajgyatva mokshase shvat. Translation. Even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all sins. Text 17. Karmano yapi bodhavyam cha vikarmana akarmana cha bodhavyam gahana karmano gatihi. Translation. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. Text 18. Karmanya karmaya pashyed akarmani cha karmaya sa buddhimam bhushyeshu sa yukta krishna karma krit. Translation. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Text 19. Yasya sarve samharabha kama sankalpa varjitaha jnanagni karma tam ahu panditam buddha. Translation. One who is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every act is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker whose fruit of action is burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. Text 20, last text. Tyaktva karma phala sangam nitya tripto nirashraya karmanya viprabhavi naiva kinchit karoti saha. Translation: abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruit of action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. So we'll go back to text 10, translation. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the supreme absolute truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is impossible for them to understand that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep the same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of that gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the supreme to be impersonal. And because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all. Being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation, they become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there's no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of attachment to the material world: negligence of spiritual life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that underlies the frustration of life. To get free from these three stages of material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of devotional life is called Bha, or transcendental love of Godhead. According to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the science of devotional service. Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangosta Bhajana Kriya Tato Narta Nivriti Syat Tato Nishtaruchi Stata Ata Shakti Stato Bhava Stata Prema Bhutanchete Sadakanam Ayam Premanats Pradurbhave Bhavet Kramaha. Sorry if I butchered that. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness in self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhav, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearlessness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations resulting from void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. Maharaj, would you like to comment on this? From this purport, we understand that there's 3 stages of attachment to the material world. Negligence of spiritual life, which means not wanting to participate in spiritual life. It's over there. I don't want to do it. I don't want to read these books about Krishna consciousness or any other spiritual book because I think I'm my body. A lot of people are in this stage. Unfortunately, they neglect their spiritual life because they think sense gratification is the all and all, and they go from one thing to the next. One thing they become tired of it. Like they say, for example, someone skateboards and they become tired of skateboarding, so they take up biking, and then they go biking, and now they're tired of biking, and they might be like an adrenaline junkie, and so they decide to go like hang gliding or bungee jumping or jump off a plane and throw out a parachute in hopes that it'll work. All precarious situations those are, and it's all thinking that it's all in the mood that I'm my body, and I'm here to enjoy my body, and when I die, I'm no more. So that's negligence of spiritual life. Then we have the next stage of attachment, fear of spiritual personal identity. So someone might have some inkling for spiritual life, but they don't have the idea that we have a spiritual identity. They think that we're ultimately void, or that we're like the example that Prabhupada gave, we're like a bubble in the ocean and we just merge into the ocean. We don't have a personality. We're just part of the ocean. And then the third one is fear of spiritual personal identity, the conception of void that underlies the frustration of life. So yeah, voidism. We think at the end we're going to be in void, and we don't have a spiritual identity. We're our bodies until we're not our bodies anymore, until we leave our bodies. But no one can explain the why there's a dead body lying there and it's not working anymore. What's the difference between the dead body and the living body? So there's these easy things we can start to question about life that can lead us to having a spiritual moment or a spiritual realization. And Prabhupada's laying this out so nicely, these things that can catch us, even though we're practicing so nicely now, we have to watch out for these things that can catch us. Thinking that we don't have a spiritual identity that will merge into the void or will merge into nothingness. That can still be there for us. So we have to be vigilant of these ideas that can come up in our minds. And basically it's all because we want to enjoy ourselves. We want to enjoy outside the pleasure of Krishna, which is actually not that much pleasure. But if we align ourselves with Krishna and do simple service like offering our foodstuffs to Krishna, inquiring from devotees about how we can serve Krishna more and more, how we can become more devoted to Krishna and know more about Krishna. So there's so many things that we can do to keep ourselves away from these these three stages of attachment to the material world. So Prabhupada explained that in the first part of the purport. Then in the second part of the purport, he quotes from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. Yeah. And he's describing the processes of devotional service, starting with the desire that there's something more in life than what this material body presents, what's more, that there's more than meets the eye. Having that desire to serve something beyond yourself and knowing that there's something grander out there than what's in front of me, something more subtle, and that there's actual happiness out there that we can attain. And then from that desire, we seek the association of others who want the same thing. Prabhupada gives the example in the Nectar of Instruction that a person who wants to be good at business, they associate with those who are also seeking the same thing. So it's not, spiritual life is not so spacey, you could say, or out of reach. That's speculation, or coming up with the ideas on your own then rather than seeking an authoritative source. Just like someone who wants to be better at business seeks the business from the authoritative person and understands the principles of business. And by understanding the principles of business, they can move forward. So by seeking the association of other individuals who are trying to advance in spiritual life practically, and that has a tangible process like we do in Bhakti Yoga, then they can come to understand the principles of Bhakti Yoga also, and they can apply that in their life. Just like a business person is applying these principles of business in their life, like there's supply and demand. If there's, enough demand, then you can sell your products, and you have to make sure you can meet you can have the supply for that demand. So these are simple, like economic business principles within business. Just like in bhakti, the more that we hear and chant Shravanam Kirtanam, we can come to understand Krishna more and more. So those are just a couple principles that one can learn from approaching someone who has authoritative knowledge on spiritual life. And in the next stage, it's described that one approaches a spiritual master. And we know that this is necessary after reading in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 4th chapter, 34th verse. Tadvini pranipatena pariprashnena sevya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanina statva darshinaha. That one, to understand the truth, one has to approach a spiritual master, and they have to render service to them. And the spiritual master can impart knowledge unto the person who's approaching them, because that spiritual master has seen the truth. And how is he seeing the truth? He's seeing the truth because he himself has also approached a spiritual master. And like that, the knowledge, as we've understood in the previous verses in the 4th chapter, is passed down from Krishna. And now we're getting the same knowledge again in the Bhagavad Gita through Krishna's conversation with Arjuna. So like that, we can take shelter of a spiritual master, and then we can fully dive into devotional service and seek instruction from him on how to perform devotional service. So once we start performing devotional service more and more, we develop an attachment to serving Krishna rather than the attachment to serving our senses. Someone might be scared to hear that we're like becoming detached from serving the senses of our body. But if we understand more fully the process of devotional service, we can understand that our senses are satisfied if we satisfy the senses of Krishna. Trying to think of that verse, Hirshikesha, Hirshikena Sevanam. Yeah, one who serves the master of the senses, his senses. Yeah, we're supposed to serve the master of the senses, not our own senses. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the verse correctly. So after we develop some attachment, we start to develop more attachment to serving Krishna and develop less attachment to serving our senses. We become more steady in our practice. We become more fixed because we can understand philosophically and we can have more love for Krishna at this stage, that we no longer want to indulge our mundane senses. We want to serve Krishna's senses. So we become steady. And then we develop an ever greater taste for serving the Lord more and more. We want to serve him more and more. And if we're out without service, then we're hankering for service. We're hankering for the association of devotees rather than the association of mundane individuals. And by association, I mean, giving and receiving gifts, giving and receiving prasadam or foodstuffs that have been offered to the Lord, and then revealing one's mind in confidence and having someone reveal their mind in confidence to you. And those exchanges are association with devotees. So then we understand that after having some attachment for Krishna consciousness and getting a taste for Krishna consciousness, we get some love for Krishna. And right now, for me, that's kind of hard to understand, having love for Krishna, because I don't know Krishna that well, but we're all trying to do that. I'm trying to do that here at RBC, trying to understand what Krishna wants more and more, and having that prayer, giving my obeisances to Krishna every day, worshiping him and trying to love him. And my best understanding of trying to love him is trying to love and serve the devotees the best way possible. And in that way, maybe I can develop some sort of love to serve Krishna. If I'm serving person devotee, then I can understand the person Krishna more and more every day. And after the bhav comes, or the love comes, prema, which is a more advanced level of love. And it's constant engagement, 24/7 engagement. Fortunately, we have an example here at Rupanuga Vedic College of that, and His Holiness Dhanavir Goswami, who's always engaged in his bhajan, always engaged in serving Krishna 24 hours a day. And that's witnessed by his servants and how they serve him every day, and they understand this fact. So we should aspire to have that constant engagement. But in order to get there, we have to be strict, sincere, and serious about our practice of bhakti. We have to attempt the best of our ability to follow the divine principles and chant 16 or more rounds a day. And that's I say that because that's recommended by Srila Prabhupada on how to advance in Krishna consciousness. And we can see from his service attitude and his devotion that we can follow him as an authoritative source. We don't have to go anywhere else in how to understand what devotional service is and how to attain this greatest boon, which is love for Krishna. So go to the next text, text 11. All of them, as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Purport. Everyone is searching for Krishna in the different aspects of his manifestations. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is partially realized in his impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence and as the all-pervading supersoul dwelling within everything, including the particles of atoms. But Krishna is only fully realized by his pure devotees. Consequently, Krishna is the object of everyone's realization, and thus anyone and everyone is satisfied according to one's desires to have him. In the transcendental world also, Krishna reciprocates with his pure devotees in the transcendental attitude, just as the devotee wants him. One devotee may want Krishna as supreme master, another as his personal friend, another as his son, and still another as his lover. Krishna rewards all the devotees equally, according to their different intensities of love for him. In the material world, the same reciprocations of feelings are there, and they are equally exchanged by the Lord with a different type of worshipers. The pure devotees, both here and in the transcendental abode, associate with him in person and are able to render personal service to the Lord and thus derive transcendental bliss in his loving service. As for those who are impersonalists and who want to commit spiritual suicide, Krishna helps us also by absorbing them into his effulgence. Such impersonalists do not agree to accept the eternal blissful personality of Godhead. Consequently, they cannot relish the bliss of transcendental personal service to the Lord, having extinguished their individuality. Some of them, who are not situated even in the impersonal existence, return to this material field to exhibit their dormant desires for activities. They are not admitted in the spiritual planets, but they are again given a chance to act on the material planets. For those who are fruit of workers, the Lord awards the desired results of their prescribed duties, as the Yageshvara, and those who are yogis seeking mystic powers are awarded such powers. In other words, everyone is dependent for success upon his mercy alone, and all kinds of spiritual processes are but different degrees of success on the same path. Unless, therefore, one comes to the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness, all attempts remained imperfect, as it is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Whether one is without desire, the condition of the devotees, or is desirous of all fruit of results, or is after liberation, one should with all efforts try to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead for complete perfection, culminating in Krishna consciousness. So Krishna is always he's always providing for the desires of everyone. This might be hard to believe, hard to understand when we see so much suffering happening in the world. It's like we think, how can someone desire suffering? How is someone going through that? And why? Even devotees, they might, or they maybe not, they're not suffering, but they might have pain. So we can understand that this is simply a reaction to that person's actions. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. You reap what you sow. So we have so many examples of how someone might perform an action and be rewarded something that's painful. And they might not understand it, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. So we as bhaktas can, we have special knowledge of the workings of the world that might be difficult for many individuals to understand. They might not understand the subtleness of karma. But we can try to inform them through chanting and send the Sankirtan Yajna, and try to give them books so they can understand these higher principles that the world's operating on. Prabhupada also explains the different relationships that we can have with Krishna. We can be Krishna's friend. We can worship Krishna in the mood of awe and reverence. We can be Krishna's parent. And we can also be Krishna's lover. Of course, to understand these things fully is a pretty high conception. It's a pretty high concept that, we might not be able to understand until we really understand that we're not our bodies. Because how can we enter into this relationship with Krishna while understanding that we're our bodies? So it's amazing how Prabhupada gives us this very intimate knowledge of what our relationship with Krishna can be like without us coming to the stage of actually understanding that. I mean, we can read it in theory and understand it, but Prabhupada's revealing it all to us. Of course, there's more and more because it's ever expanding. But he's giving us a glimpse of the blissful life that we can have in Krishna consciousness and being always in contact with the Lord. Okay, I think I'll end there. Is there any questions or comments, chastisements? Yes, Prabhu. This is what is down here. Oh, there you go.
Okay, so when I heard that you could be either take Krishna as your master, as your friend, is it wrong to just want Krishna as a friend, not as a complete master? Or should we always strive to have Krishna as a master? Probably because I'm still new to this and stuff, but the idea of having a friend is way more intriguing than to have a master.
It's more intimate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, because I don't know, like I just feel like a master is like, well, am I a slave then? Like I'd rather, have like an intimate relationship with my buddy, with Krishna, But yes, thank you. That's my question.
Answer that.
Yeah, the stage of friendship has different categories too. There's the friends who are in awe and reverence. They're friendly, but at the same time, they keep some aspects of being a servant. And there's friends who are just completely forgetful that Krishna is God even, and they just treat him exactly like as equal. And there's other friends, like Lord Balaram, he's a friend of Krishna, but he has some aspects of parental protection. He wants to, like his younger brother, so he has to take care of him like that. So there's all different aspects of friendship, but yes, friendship is a higher stage than accepting the master, because everyone understands God as the master. You can't help it. but that's, some people don't even have that. The impersonalists can't even do that. But yes, higher than thinking of Krishna as Supreme Master is to see Krishna as one's friend. But that's up to Krishna. According to, he only gives that type of intimate friendship to those who are totally surrendered to him. So therefore, obedience is the beginning of all these levels of spiritual advancement. One has to be, obedient, fully surrendered servant. Then he can go up to the other stage.
Thank you, Maharaj. It's Rishi here. Magadari.
So just a follow-up question. What motivation? So I know that obedience is the first, or is the beginning of all these different stages of, in one sense, to me, they seem more attractive stages of love for Krishna. But it's kind of distasteful to be obedient. So I guess I'm wondering how I can have enthusiasm for obedience.
Well, we have a bad taste in our mouth from obedience in the material because we're obedient to someone, then we feel like they've exploited me, they've taken advantage of me. I was obedient, but I didn't get what I wanted. So we have to put aside all these material conceptions of relationships. So like so many people, the women feel they're disgusted with relationships with the men, and men feel they're disgusted with relationships. Everyone's disgusted, so they give up the idea of not being a person. Take that idea. But that's not at all a higher stage. That's certainly a lower, more dull stage. So on the spiritual level, there's no obedience is not a bad word. Like, am I going to be a slave? Slave is not a bad word when it comes to Krishna, because slave in the perfect sense has no exploitation. The slave agrees to do everything that the master wants, not just because he's forced by some law or some brute force, but he, out of love, wants to do that. So you have to always remember these relationships are free from any kind of anomaly or impurity of exploitation or anything lacking or some kind of exploitation. Free of that.
Is there another? That was a nice comment, Maharaj. Thank you. Is there another question that you had, Prabhu, on there or on the Zoom or something? Was there a question you had, or was it on the Zoom?
I don't know if it's appropriate for me to make a comment, but I had a comment, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. I just like this part in the purport. This verse, Krishna is not saying yatamat tatopat, or that, like the Mayavadis sometimes say, that all paths lead to the same place. But it's clarified more in the purport, where what Krishna is saying is that he is rewarding the results of these different paths. So the fruitive worker, he wants some material gain, and the person who's giving that gain is Krishna. And then the yogi, they want some mystic power, and it's Krishna who's awarding those powers. And then Prabhupada says, in other words, everyone is dependent for success on his mercy alone. So they're all dependent. It's not that all the paths are leading to the same place, but they're all dependent on Krishna for the success of that path. And then it's also further specified a little more in that sentence. Prabhupada saying all kinds of spiritual processes are but different degrees of success on the same path. So like if I want to get to the attic and I'm going on the ladder and I just get to the second stair, I can't say, okay, it's all these, I'm on the second stair, it's the same as being at the attic. But he's saying that all these different paths are different degrees on the same, all these different processes are different degrees on the same path. I tried to point it out because I thought it was nice, but it might have made it sound more confusing.
Thank you for your comment. I just had one more thing to say. We can practice being in the spiritual world here right now by practicing our relationships with others, with devotees especially, by bettering our relationships with devotees, and trying to seek more understanding between devotees and their so-called deficiencies and our so-called deficiencies, and we can strive beyond that by understanding that we're all conditioned souls, and that way we can have more love for each other, and maybe someday we can get a glimpse of the unconditional love that Krishna has for us, and that we can have for him too, to the extent that our little fragmental part and parcel of Krishna can do. Thanks for all your attendance and comments and questions, and for tolerating me. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Vanchakalpa Tribhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyo Vacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnava.